Today's video brought to you by Corona Extra. Now with up to 100% more viruses. Although they're not the sponsor of this video, and probably doesn't really have anything to do with viruses, but you know what else doesn't have viruses? Linux. You might have heard this before, but you might not know what Linux is. Frankly, neither did I for a really long time until one of my friends told me about it. And then I still didn't know what it was, because I ignored him for a very long time, which probably sounds very similar to an experience you've had before if you've heard of Linux. What the hell is it? Well, here we have some images of the interwebs of things called operating systems, as you can see here. What is an operating system? Well, I mean, it's not really important, all the technical details, but essentially when you buy a computer and you bring it home, it has some software on it that makes it do things. Software such as iOS or Windows. But what is this awkward cousin here in the middle who, just kind of sits there looking content, fat, full? What is it? Looks kind of kludgy, doesn't it? Kind of weird, kind of strange. And, what are all these other strange icons? We've got, like, Ubuntu. What the heck is that? Android. And what makes these two things related? Today, I'm going to tell you about it. So, first of all, Linux is not an operating system. It is what we call the family of operating systems, which all share in common a piece of technology called a kernel. So a kernel is this thing, this kernel space here. If you pretend that all of this business in this left square, you can ignore this, all the business in the left square is the operating system. You have user space, virtual machines potentially, the hardware of the machine, but between the user space, between all of the programs and functionality on your machine, you have a piece of software that operates in the background, under the hood, if you will, like the engine of the machine. That is the kernel. It interfaces directly with the hardware to tell programs what to do with hardware information and what the hardware should do based on program input. So, in essence, the kernel is like the engine in your car. And that kernel is called Linux. But the operating systems that use these kernels are pretty much all separate operating systems. There are a whole bunch of them. There's like Manjaro, Arch, Debian, Ubuntu, Ubuntu is based on Debian, which is just an older version of Linux, Fedora, Red Hat, just a whole bunch of different kinds of what we call distributions, which are just operating systems in and of themselves. And the only thing that's different about them is that they all share this same kernel. So maybe you're thinking to yourself this moment, why doesn't Microsoft have operating systems that share a kernel with anything else? And that's a great question. And the answer is open source. So the GNU General Public License, the GPL, is essentially a form of copyright that prevents the thing it copyrights from being copyrighted. Or, I guess less convolutedly, it protects things from becoming closed source. It keeps them open in the general public domain so that the code or document or whatever the license is being applied to can be copied, studied, read, distributed by anyone. See, most of Apple and Windows code is maintained very secretively. It doesn't ever reach public eyes. But all of the Linux source code and all of the GNU/Linux source code in any operating system containing Linux is, for the most part, 100% open source and publicly available to be studied, copied, whatever. The main difference is that it also, because it is not proprietary and not secret, it doesn't lend itself well to the direct sale model. So you don't buy a lot of computers with Linux already on it. You kind of have to know where to look to find it, and you have to kind of know what you're doing to install it. So it makes it kind of an elite thing. But because it's open source, it is free as in freedom. It's free as in you have the ability to do with it what you want, and this man is the reason that is the case. And he's actually very famous for it in certain nerd circles. His name is Richard Stallman. You might recognize the stained glass semblance of Jesus that he's being portrayed as here on the 4chans. America. Freedom. Anyways, that was a bad joke. Yeah, so Linux is just an operating system, which I am currently running on my computer, and, well, Linux is the piece of the operating system. And I have on my computer Kubuntu, which is a flavor of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an operating system. It's a Linux, a Unix clone. One of the probably thousands of versions of the GNU/Linux operating system. And, you know, it does some neat things. One of those things is that because it has a lot of public maintainers, it doesn't have a ton of viruses. One of the things I really like about this machine is that I get no pop-ups. I have complete control over what is and is not on this computer. You can select Linux flavors that come with more or less prepackaged things, but you always have the option to update how you want to. One of the ways you can update is through the terminal. I have a script called update. All I have to do is type that. It asks me for my password, and I go like that, and it will run. If I want to automate this process, I can. I have to know a little bit about how to do that to set it up, but there are other simpler ways. You don't have to run it through the terminal here. You can also just close this, come down here, go to Discover Software Center, open this up, and update things this way. Fetching updates. Once all the updates are fetched, I can run this, and it will update my computer graphically, same as on a Windows environment. The difference is I don't get any notifications or pop-ups saying I have to. It's always completely optional. And that is, in essence, the power of Linux. Another thing that's very cool about Linux that some people know of it for is its ability to breathe life into old, busted machinery. I personally own a ThinkPad X220, which is a 2011 laptop, and it is an old, like, quote-unquote good ThinkPad from back in the day, but the hardware on it is not very substantial. Even still, it runs very quickly because Linux is optimized in such a way that it works well on essentially any machine. It's not going to make really good machines run any better than they already do, because at a certain point the hardware just kind of caps out regardless of what you put on it, but it will make old, quote-unquote busted machinery run very nicely. So that is another upside to it. It can be as graphically user-friendly or as user-centric as you like, whether you're a terminal guy or a GUI guy. It has all of the basics. It's got your standard web browser, as you'd expect. It's got stuff like OBS and open broadcasting software. I've got Steam, music players, Zoom, video editors, image manipulators, and all of this comes to me for no cost. I have paid for absolutely none of this stuff, save for the games I bought on Steam, but disavow. I bought them before I knew about the evils of DRM technology. That said, I still play them because, you know, we're all locked in our houses and I don't really have anything better to do during Corona season. Since I'm back to Corona, I guess I'll end this video. I hope this has been at least somewhat instructive to you and at the very least entertaining. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.